Welcome to the Cap Planner podcast, where we dive into the dynamic world of private capital markets. Whether you're new to private market investing or a seasoned professional, this podcast unpacks the latest trends, insights, and opportunities shaping the industry. Featuring expert guests and deep discussions, Cap Planner is your go-to resource for staying informed and inspired. Today's guest is Larry Leisure, co-founder and co-managing partner of Chicago Pacific Founders, a private equity firm investing in senior living, value-based care, and tech-enabled healthcare services. Larry has held senior leadership roles at major consulting firms and was an investor at Kleiner Perkins. Larry has also co-founded Nearwater Growth, which he launched with his son to invest in early-stage digital health companies. Larry, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
We've been trying to get you on this podcast for a long time. And you know what? I know that when Morgan calls you, you're more willing to talk to her than me now. So that's why I don't try anymore.
That's true.
I know you're nicer to Morgan. So, but I'm the gift with purchase. It's a buy one, get one free. So we get a twofer where you get one lander, you get two.
Well, I miss having Morgan in the office.
It is true. Jody and I both used to live in San Francisco. And when I first came on board to working for Jody's company, I shared my first office was actually in Larry's office along with one of his portfolio companies. So it was a fun one. I was definitely trying to get my sea legs under me.
You and I go back how many years you think? Like 10? When you came in, you went to go work at Kleiner Perkins. And
Yeah, that was about 2005, wasn't it? Or something like that?
20
Yeah.
years ago. And I
Yeah.
had you were referred to me to talk about compensation. And you and I met in San Francisco downtown at One Market. And I remember thinking, boy, what an honor that this guy is willing to meet with me and he's asking me questions. So take us from there with your illustrious career and bring that fast forward to today.
Well, it is interesting. Jody, I don't know if you forgot, but I started my consulting career off at Towers
Howard
Parent.
Aaron, I do remember.
And I was running the benefit practice there. But actually, when I first started in the benefit practice, I ran a subspecialty within Towers Parent was focused on executive benefits. So while it wasn't directly executive comp, at the time, there was a lot of use of exotic instruments to fund deferred compensation and supplemental retirement benefits. And that's how I got started. And it was really the relationships I developed doing executive comp with board members and senior HR executives that launched my benefits career because it gave me access to the most senior executives, at large public companies. And being the quiet, shy guy I am,
Yeah.
I'm not actually. I use those opportunities to share my grandiose ideas with senior executives, how they could be more thoughtful in terms of how they built their benefit programs.
So you always
Eh,
were a visionary though, like you knew you had good ideas and you knew that you had to find a lane to be able to voice and articulate. You needed agency for this.
Yeah. Well, that gave me agency. When I was at Towers Perrin, when I first joined, they were a pure actuarial firm. And they had kind of a comp practice, but a pretty modest compensation practice, but primarily actuarial and compensation. And so nobody really got in my way. Somebody was nuts enough to make me the practice leader in my early 30s. And so I thought, wow, we can do something with this. And so we merged what was really more of a management consulting capability with benefits consulting, and we did transformational consulting for
Okay, but
large corporations
this
and
isn't really
helping
the
them
fun.
rethink.
But how did you get that's it. This I need the crux of this to parlay into because you're a private, you're an investor, a board member. How did
Yeah.
from that to from the actuarial stuff into this sort of sexy business?
Well, what happened is I did the benefits consulting thing, was very successful at that. And then I decided that management consulting was a lot more interesting because it paid a lot better.
Right.
So I
That's the
left
way.
Towers and went to Price Waterhouse, and I doubled my income. And I said, this is pretty good. And then I realized one day the Price Waterhouse was an accounting firm. Go figure. How did I miss that?
Always the optimist, Larry. That's what I think, because you always try and see the good in something, even if it's not actually, the highlight. You're very good at that.
Well, it was very interesting because Price Waterhouse exposed me to a whole world of working with large payers. and pharmacy benefit managers. And I was able to leverage the experience I'd had working with large employers to be successful in serving large payers. And then I did that for 5 years. And then I was recruited by Anderson Consulting. And Anderson Consulting was like a rocket ship at the time, and it was growing by leaps and bounds. And they were trying to grow their payer provider practice. And so they recruited me to be the strategy competency leader within the health vertical. And it was wildly successful. It was,
So
we had a
crazy.
great run.
And also, it's so crazy now how the whole payer provider is really an industry in and of itself. Like you had no idea. This just shows you when with the planning for a career, you had no idea that you were learning about an industry in a sector like the healthcare industry in a way that would serve you for decades.
Yeah, it did. And those relationships were very, very powerful. But in any case, the day I joined Anderson Consulting, we lost our largest client, which was like three-quarters of our business, which was Kaiser. And so I spent the next 2 years on the road, and we got Aetna, Cigna, United,
All the
Pacific
healthcare,
Care, Medco, all as clients.
right?
And so it was a great experience. And
Were you ever interested in healthcare before the consulting? Like, were you ever, are your parents doctors? Did you have any of it in the family where where it
well,
sparked your interest?
one of my early mentors, a guy named Herb Weiner, ran the Permanente Medical Group in Southern California. So was exposed to healthcare, but it was really through benefits consulting that I really got into healthcare. But in any case, the Accenture thing worked great. I had three roles. I ran strategy competency, the startup practice, which really gave me, exposure to early stage companies, both corporate funded and venture funded. And then after the crash in 2000, when startups were out of vogue for a while, I was recruited back to run the health vertical for Accenture.
Now, were you in the Bay Area this whole time? And also at that time, still obviously married, and you have your son. And so, where were you physically located?
Well, when I was with Towers Parent, I was in New York. I
Right,
moved from San Francisco to New York, and I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, and commuted to Midtown to 45 Park Avenue. And then when I moved to Pricewaterhouse, I moved to the West Coast to
right.
San Francisco. But for almost 5 years, I commuted back and forth to New York every other week, which
Yeah,
was
you were
insane.
on the road.
When when in
Go ahead,
there
Mark.
did you get when in there did you get your MBA from UCLA?
I got right after after I graduated from Stanford, I had a fascination with art history. And there was two universities that had programs in arts management. One was Wharton and the other one was UCLA. And there was a couple of reasons. One is I really, really, really wasn't ready to go to work. I really didn't want to go to Vietnam, which was still going on in 1972, 73. And I thought at UCLA, I'd grown up in Los Angeles. My parents were very involved at UCLA. And once I got into that program, I realized very quickly that everybody else in the program had a lot of dough.
Right. You
And
gotta
so
go
I
work for
quick
being a Renaissance guy is one thing, but then, like, making an income off of art is another.
yeah, so I switched to accounting finance.
Right.
And then ultimately after that, actually went to work in a family business. My grandfather was an extraordinarily successful insurance guy. Actually, the company that he helped start is what is now Transamerica as the Transamerica Pyramid.
So you had the
So,
skills in you, though. That maybe that's where you were you know what you have when because I'm from Buffalo. If anybody watched the Bills game the other day, they can understand this. So you had the hustle and the grit. Like, you knew that you were gonna find a way to run down that field.
well, actually, there's an interesting story here. In high school, I was third in my class from the bottom. And well, you count different ways. And I'll never forget in the meeting with my father was on the board of the school, prestigious prep school in LA. And it's the headmaster, my mom and my dad. And I'm in the room and the headmaster's explaining to my parents that I'm not the sharpest bulb or the brightest bulb. And then maybe a good GC was appropriate given my intellectual limitations. And meanwhile, I had near perfect college board scores.
Right.
I don't know,
Good
Morgan, if
testament.
you ever had to take those things.
Yeah, oh, she
And
did.
so I had gotten into UCLA and Berkeley, and they didn't know this, of course. And so, and then I did what every smart kid would do was, I repeated my senior year of high school and college, got a 4 point, and I applied to Yale and all these other schools. And my dad had gone to Stanford, been Mr. Everything. And I never forget calling my father and said, um, tuition's going up next quarter. And he goes, why? And I said, well, I'm changing schools. And he said, did you flunk out? And I said, no, actually, I'm going to Stanford. And my dad says, oh my God, they've lowered their standards. So that was,
Well,
Larry, I don't think anybody could lower their standards for you. I don't think it's possible.
but it just getting back to the journey part, because this is interesting. So I did go from the benefits consulting to management consulting, which I think was great. And I learned a lot. And then after Accenture went public, it wasn't fun. The public stuff wasn't fun. And so my largest client was Kaiser, and the then head of Kaiser Foundation Health Plan said, well, why don't you get a real job? Instead of telling people what to do or how to do it, why don't let's see if you can really operate. So I was recruited to run the commercial part of Kaiser, um, the non-Medicare, Medicaid businesses. And it was fun. I learned a whole different business. I did discover that Kaiser was a not-for-profit, and I wanted to move a little faster than that. And then I did a couple kind of earlier stage companies, then was recruited to United Healthcare
right. This was
to
your
work for
big
one
United Healthcare has been come into play into your career in many,
many,
avenues.
many, many ways.
Yeah.
United Healthcare was run by a bunch of ex-Anderson Consulting, Arthur Anderson folks, including Steve Hempsey, who's still there, which is hysterical. Great, great executive. And so I was running payer in what was called now called Optum Insight. And that was great because that I learned a lot from that experience. The challenge with working with United is to really make it work. You really need to live in Minneapolis,
Right.
and I kind of liked living in the Bay
I'm
Area.
a coastal
You didn't
guy.
wanna be you didn't wanna be a Minnesota person and walk the tunnels in the middle of the winter versus be on the beaches by UCLA or in the redwood trees at Stanford?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. And so when I was getting frustrated with the commuting to Minnesota, I was in a cocktail party during Christmas, and I was in the kitchen with Brooke Byers from Kleiner Perkins,
Kleiner
and Brooke and I were,
Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers. Now, you
yeah,
know, because Brooke did my first press quotes when we ran the first private company survey that was focused on biotech. They interviewed Brooke on sort of on my behalf. So I have a fond place in my complete career for Brooke because he's really just a wonderful colleague and mentor.
yeah, I just went to his 80th celebration on Saturday,
Oh,
and we had the Mendel Circus Club near where we live.
yeah.
Um, it was um, it was quite an event. Um, but in any case, with the whole classic crowd. But in any case, I digress. And so we're in the kitchen. We're trying to remember the woman who was running for governor of California at the time. And we were both hiding in the kitchen, avoiding being hustled for campaign contributions. And Brooke was whining about his diagnostic companies not getting coverage and reimbursement. And I suggested to Brooke that instead of calling the payers not bright, he was a little more colorful than that. There's probably a better way to win them over, and so I was explaining this. And he said, "Well, maybe you should come to Kleiner Perkins." And I said, "Well, I never quite thought about that." And so the next thing I know, I'm at Kleiner Perkins as an operating partner.
Right. And that's
At the
that's
time,
when you and I met.
that was when you and I met. And at the time I joined, we were primarily focused in diagnostic and therapeutics and devices. And I was able to convince Brooke and Beth Seidenberg and Joe Lacob, who was there at the time, Dana Mead. It was quite a good group of investors.
Those groups still exists today, but not like that. I mean, this was the quintessential Sand Hill Road venture, life sciences. Everyone was smart, and also the whole energy there was very sophisticated and
Oh my God, it was Kleiner was on a roll. I mean, it was doing extraordinarily well. But one of the things that I wanted to do is digital health, and so we did three digital health companies in a row: Teladoc, Livongo, and Progeny, which were all enormously successful, kind of return the fund kind of investments. And so it got me pretty jazzed about not only investing in these companies, but advising these companies. And I found that a lot of the insights I had around the business and how you grow it was valued. And along the way, I helped form two sort of innovation groups. One was called Health Spotter, and another one called the Employee Health Innovation Roundtable, which was really bringing together uh, interesting, innovative companies with payers that were interested in looking at innovation, and then having the opportunity to really observe, what resonated, what didn't, who had the best likelihood of gaining traction, and
but with HealthSpotter, because that's Carlene Hahn, right?
kind of hard.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly, who is not only a friend and colleague. I believe I met Carlene through you, but she is in, Marin County, California, and then this is just to show you how it all goes, because one summer, my son, Morgan's brother, Blake, was their Manny, and he
That's right.
not only took care of the kids, but he went on vacation with them. So this is like the way that we do it. Everyone's connected. Of course, Carlene is on my board of advisors, as are you, just to clarify. But we're connected many different ways.
Yeah, but in any case, but it was a fun time, and I really
It was a
enjoyed
fun
Kleiner.
time.
But about that time, my former colleague partner from Accenture, Mary Tolan, said, "Why don't we go raise a private equity fund?"
Right.
And
Which makes
you have this
you
whole Chicago Pacific founders, and the whole thesis was an operator-led fund. So we had experience as CEOs, advisors, industry experts, and we believe that we brought unique skills to the table to allow us to identify early companies that needed growth or private equity buyout, that we could help them during the whole period, and with all the relationships we had, that we could be very successful in.
how
Nobody is
many
a better
people
networker than you. I mean, you are the best networker ever. You know so many people in so many iterations. And the thing about it is not only you know them, but you have a ability to spend a little bit of time and really endear people to you, because everyone feels lucky when they get a chance to hear you talk or give input, or you have that incredible ability. And I think it's really been a tribute to you.
somebody who's listening to this and not watching, Larry has a big, big smile on his face, like
Smile.
they're showing type of smile.
Well, the funny thing about this is everybody says I'm the most connected person in healthcare. I don't know if that's a compliment or not,
It's a compliment.
but
It is.
but certainly I've made an effort to try and understand who are the movers and shakers and build relationships with them. Years ago, I got some advice from a guy named Keith Ferrazzi, and there was two pieces of advice that particularly stick out. One is if you aren't spending 10% of your time on your own brand, you're screwing yourself. So, because if you don't own your career and you aren't investing time in your brand, shame on you. The other piece of advice he gave me, there's only 25 people that matter that can really advance your career. It isn't 1,000 people. You just got to figure out who your 25 are. So one of the things I do to my CEOs and others I advise is spend some time to figure out who your 25 are and nail those. And you'll find that those 25, if you get it right, are going to introduce you to everybody else.
What other do you give your founders and your executives? Somebody comes to you and they have 10 minutes of your time and they sit with you. What are your must do, especially for a founder or somebody to be successful?
I think one is people respect people have a point of view. So it's great to be inquisitive and ask questions, but also have a point of view about the world. And I've always had fairly strong views about where I thought the world is and where I thought it was going. And I think it allowed me to be relevant even at a very young age to very senior people because I always tried to have an informed
Right, they
point of view.
wanted your
Some,
opinion. They wanted to know
yeah.
what you thought, and you had something to say that wasn't necessarily going, "Well, I don't know. What do you think?"
The other thing is make time for people, listen. Uh, the other thing when you're young, it's I said when you're particularly young, people want to help you. Older, experienced executives like giving time to you. But I think that's an important one. I think generosity is important. I think I make time for people. I try to be kind, and the other thing, I have this thing that at some point, whatever your religion is, but I say when you get to St. Peter and it's the end of your life and they're doing the plus minus, I want to make sure I'm on the plus side of
Right.
that. And so I think a fair amount about that. Uh, and then also try to really build a vibrant, interconnected community. I call it this flywheel effect that I've been able to help build and leverage my whole life. And so I think that, I people say, well, how do you get so many opportunities? And I'd say, well, the phone rings, and it rings constantly.
Right, that's a lot of pipeline. I always say to Jody that you're planting seeds and you don't necessarily know when the flowers are growing, and then all of a sudden one day you walk outside and you see little green sprouts all over the ground, and that's the equivalent of your phone ringing.
I would
You
say, Larry,
also,
you also, I mean, I remember sitting with you at the Ferry Building once, and we were talking about the Thielander business, and you were always great because I didn't ever get a lot of your time, but I got really, micro dosing of your time, so it was impactful, and you said to me, "Jody, you gotta take this business to the next level, and you gotta increase your revenue." And I was like, "Okay." I walked out of there, and I was like, "We are increasing the revenue," and we did. Like, you have such a good vision. So with that, what's on your horizon now? Like, if you're where you are in your career, which is obviously a very comfortable place in that you've gone through all these iterations and you've had a directive with healthcare and with technology and you what next?
well, the complication I have is I wear four hats, which is challenging. I'm obviously a co-founder, co-managing partner of Chicago Pacific, and I'm actually sort of scaling back my efforts there with this fourth fund. But I am involved in one of our newest companies, our first investments in Fund Four, which is an ICRA company. I won't get into the details, but it's really looking at this movement in healthcare from what they call defined benefit, defined contribution. Much as we saw what's happening in retirement plans, is looking to take shape in the healthcare space. I started a company with my son called Nearwater Growth.
Tell
Uh,
us.
the the think about that originally was we're going to do water and sustainability advisory and investing. We are doing none. It's all healthcare. but
Well, healthcare, that seems to be the common theme. But
Can't seem to get away from it.
that's 3 hats. I know another hat you're wearing. You can say the 4.
well, let me finish on this one because it's interesting because I'm working with my son. He's the managing member, by the way, Morgan. You should
I did
explain
hear
this to your
about this.
mother. He is the managing member. And I'm the creative, see you around the corner, like, the curious guy. And JP's the very disciplined management consultant, who, we said we are going to do this, we're going to deliver this,
Keeps you on
and
track.
Yeah, exactly,
he
that's
keeps me on track. So,
accountable. He's
so,
your accountability coach.
so that's my second hat. Third hat is I did end up reconciling with my family, and we have extensive real estate holdings in Beverly Hills. So I find myself running a real estate company, which I never intended. And then last, I do a lot of not-for-profit work. I chaired the UCSF Roseman board.
Right.
I'm on the board of Stanford Biodesign, the advisory board of Stanford Biodesign. I was until a month ago on the board of UCLA Anderson Business School. I do some things now with the University of Chicago and Aspen Institute. So more in terms
I
of
think you're
Such a
the
forgetting one hat.
intersective
Yeah, and then we're forgetting one hat. What's that
Yeah.
hat, Morgan?
I think you're a grandfather,
I would
Larry.
get yeah,
Well, I
look
was
at
going to
that
get to
little
that.
baby.
That's a hat.
There's
That
that smile
yeah,
again, Larry, all
There you
smiles.
go.
yeah. Logan Pierce Leisure. He's got a lot of energy. So yeah, and we're looking at thinking about moving to Marin, by the way, to Tiburon. So
Get closer to him.
yeah,
Why not?
yeah. I did the ferry thing. I'm sure you've done from Tiburon over to the ferry building in San Francisco. And I must
So
say
nice.
it's a
Oh,
pretty cool commute. So,
yeah, well,
but but it's interesting. I just turned 75, and as I look around, none of my friends who are even close to my age are still at it. So everybody thinks I'm kind of a nut, but I don't see as long as I have purpose and love what I
like my
do.
grandmother used to say, age is just a number, and you've got this incredible energy and inertia and all the things that, we were just talking about this today, and then we will wind up that, people are not leaving jobs and looking to turn over as much in their careers. People are looking more so for longevity and going to jobs and staying. And that's where someone like you who has had this amazing career and really parlayed everything you and everything and everyone into success on all fronts with a tremendous heart and also capability that you lend. It's a perfect example of what everyone today now is looking to accomplish.
It's interesting. You asked the question, Morgan, advice, sort of a story and then a comment. When I was in Greenwich, everybody was a banker. They were all financially oriented. And I never forget when I came out to back to the Bay Area, I was at a soccer game for my son who was doing these kitty kick thing. And I was going around meeting the people on the sidelines, the other parents. And, like there was somebody who was starting Google and somebody was doing a life science thing. And everybody was doing or creating something incredible. And I just go, wow, this is like I've died and gone to heaven. I mean, it was just everybody was doing something that was, game changing. And I just go, I found my home. But I think being curious is really important. Like always saying, looking at things and saying, why is it like that? Or is there an opportunity there? It was interesting. We have a golden retriever who had a bum shoulder. And my wife, we needed to have surgery and went to Sage Veterinary in Campbell. And I never forget going in the clinic, and it was this beautiful, clean, pristine clinic. The surgeon, who'd also been at Stanford a little bit after me, and I was so impressed. And I remember coming back and go, "That's a really interesting business. Why don't we buy that business?" And so we invested something like 35 between us and co-investors, probably 50 million. And then we sold it a couple of years later for 1.2 billion. It was a 16x plus return. And it was just curious. Well, that's an interesting business.
Right. You knew.
Wow. Where could you go with that? And so I don't know. I think continue to be curious and
Right. You just
uh,
never know.
you never know. And also just whether it's curious about people, there's things that you don't know about people that if you ask a few questions and hang out, you go, wow,
That's the
that
time.
person's got an interesting story. But I think being curious and being interested,
Right.
um,
Like your 2
eh,
words for the recipe for success.
I think that Larry's recipe also has a lot of things where he's sort of like, in the kitchen putting things in dose in little, pieces that you don't know and you can't figure out and you can't recreate. But
Right.
it's
one last story. I promise I won't belabor it, but I'm also try to be a constant learner, and try and get better. Like how can I be better? And I'll forget. I was at a dinner party, a very elegant dinner party. This was like 10 or 15 years ago, and I was sitting next to a very elegant older woman, and I just thought I was so charming, and and I can be, sometimes. We got up to leave, and she put her hand on my arm, and she said, you're a very nice young man. I said, well, thank you. That young. She says, but I want to leave you one thought. And I said, well, what's that? She said, just remember, it's more important to be interested than interesting. And that was the most cutting comment but I learned a lot. from that. So I try and be a better listener and be more interested than just interesting. If I need to work on that a little bit probably.
Well, it's good to have things to work on. I think awareness is also a very big piece of it. So, Larry, all I can say is a big thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for always being good to Morgan. Thank you for all of the guidance and leadership. You're not off the hook yet. It's not like we're going anywhere, but you have made a huge impact on my career and the direction. And you always ask good questions and keep us on our toes. So, a big appreciation for that. And we're going to look forward to seeing you in Marin because Morgan was raised there. I spent what,
I
22
know.
years in Marin County, so I think that would be a good next move for you. That's my vote.
Well, I thank you so much. And I'm so impressed with what you guys have built. The smartest thing you ever did, Jody, was getting Megan to join the team, Morgan to join the team.
Megan? There I'm always called you Megan. He always called you Megan, though. That it's not the first time. This has been a constant.
Morgan, I'm so sorry. It's on my brain. I
My
apologize.
name is on the screen, Larry. It says Morgan.
I'm
It's
looking at the
literally
I know,
spelled
I
out.
know, I know.
Larry's probably looking at 5 other things and on a board call on the side hustle over here.
No, I am not. Morgan, I'm not. Honest to God, I'm not. But in any case, but I did have a chance to see that your new offerings,
I
and oh my
did. We
God,
did take Larry through all the platform upgrades.
and so much of this, Jody, is stuff we talked about.
Yeah, I know.
It's so amazing to see what you built.
Thank you. For all the talking I do, somewhere in there, I do find a way to listen to, only when I have respect for
Yeah, yeah.
someone. So I always listen to you, Larry. I
Well,
mean,
the
Larry.
smartest thing you did was hiring Morgan. So,
There we
Thank you.
go.
I
We
agree.
got
That's a
it.
good way
now
to
Morgan,
wrap
just
up.
wait till when she's going to let you be the managing partner, though. That's that we got to work on that.
All right.
Larry, I'm Jody's COO. I've got a very nice title that
I know. I like the
I'm
title.
perfectly content. It matches and it actually is a very good fit for what I do. So
Good, good.
I'm good. But Larry, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.